Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. Hope you had a good week so far. Hope you're enjoying this lovely weather, and if you're in the UK, couldn't have asked for better weather for being locked inside, but it's you can't complain. So welcome to the podcast. If this is the first time you're listening, this is the number one podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation, and if this is the first time you've ever listened to this podcast, I do recommend you go back to the beginning, go back to number one, because we've kind of taken you on a journey of strategies of everything that I've done really in my life to kind of achieve a level of financial independence that I've been able to achieve right now. And if you go back to the beginning, you'll see exactly what I did. So go back there if you after you've listened to this one, obviously. But we're in for a treat this week because last week I was talking all about this podcast is all about wealth creation, and you've had a series of strategies up until this point, and right now we're kind of going into the realms of where I had transformation in my business income. And my business income, as I say all the time, is a business is really an extension of you, and the importance of getting your message out there so people resonate with you first. And if they resonate with you, many of you listeners listening to this, you're listening to me in intimate locations. You're in the gym, you're in the bed, you're on the beach, you're on the, and not right now, you're not, because it's we're in lockdown. But it's a real powerful way to connect with an audience, okay, and get them on that polarized level so that you understand, so they can relate. They really, really relate to where you're at. And once they connect with your message, any business that you launch will do much better than if you're just trying to kind of build a business and then try and sell. It's much more effortless. It's much more, there's no scratching and biting and clawing and competing and all that kind of stuff. So that really boils down to personal messaging, personal branding, and getting yourself out there as an authority and a celebrity, if you like, in your industry. And last week we had on Jonathan Holton, and we was talking about this. We was talking about the power of some of the social platforms, namely LinkedIn, because he's a strategist in LinkedIn, absolute genius in LinkedIn. And after that episode, I did get a few messages talking about, oh yeah, look, I really do want to get it. It was a great episode, but I just have this fear, I have this overwhelming fear that whatever I put out, is not going to be good enough. And we had people say that they'd written blogs and then deleted them. We had people say that they'd posted a video and then deleted it, an Instagram post and deleted it, in fear of what other people were saying. So what I did after that was I posted a very, very vulnerable video, okay, an unedited, vulnerable video of my first ever attempt at a YouTube video. And I thought, sod it. Hopefully this will give people some motivation to do it, because right now we're in a place where everyone wants to do it. They know they've got all this time and they're trying to think, they're thinking, I've really got to do this. This is a perfect time for me. But they're really struggling. So all of this week, I've really been trying to help people get encouraged to come on and do more and put their message out there. So it is with great pleasure that today we've got a fantastic expert in this particular field, Tara Halliday, who specializes in helping people overcome imposter syndrome and much, much more. So Tara, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Jason. Delighted to be here.
Excellent. So, Tara, do you want to tell, for those of you not listening, Tara works with us inside the Tiers of Freedom. She's delivered a lot of great content for that platform in the personal growth module. But for those who don't know, who are listening, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in the world, Tara.
Who I am is, as you say, a specialist in imposter syndrome. I've been working in the field of coaching and high performance and training and holistic therapy for 20 years now. Before that, I was a consultant engineer. I've got a PhD in engineering. And the reason I have PhD in engineering is because of my imposter syndrome, which which sounds crazy, but that's exactly what happened. And as I was working with people, helping them through all sorts of crises and helping them let go of things and, be the best they can be, and even more stretch themselves and enjoy it, I found that I needed to go deeper. I couldn't stop. I couldn't focus on one thing. It had to be everything, all parts of their lives. It couldn't be shallow. It had to go really, really deep. So in investigating how people could get the best out of themselves, I came across a coaching program that was all about worth, which is worth. Most of us believe our worth is conditional. So that's the heart of it. And the freedom comes from when we know that our worth is unconditional. And that's what I train. So that's the basis for my work. And then I've also spent 18 months doing trainings for people in neurofeedback, where you have electrodes on your head and you're measuring the alpha brain waves, because that high alpha brain waves are correlated with a high performance flow state. And so I've put all of that together into my program, which is all about getting rid of imposter syndrome.
Wow. So there you go, right? So it's not just about there's a lot more to imposter syndrome than you might realize. It's not just a case of you not being good enough and thinking you're the only one. There's a lot of science behind this. There's a lot of reasoning behind this. Yeah. And if there's reasoning behind it, it means there's also a way to dissolve it. So in this podcast, we're going to be going over some insights and some kind of tips and tricks that you can do to overcome that if you are, if you've got this problem that you feel like you're not good enough. So what I do want to talk about, Tara, is the mindset side. So initially, why do people have this fear primarily? Because what I've found, it's usually down to you've got someone kind of on a pedestal, you're looking up to someone and you don't want to look stupid in front of them. I always kind of think, if I was going to do a talk to some kids, I'd be confident. But if I was going to do a talk to some adults, you might be a little bit more, and it's kind of that having them on looking up to them in some way. So what is it?
So what you're talking about is comparing. We compare ourselves to other people, which we naturally do, and in a positive way. That's getting inspiration, getting good feedback. So that all works really nicely. However, what we tend to do is we compare how we're feeling on the inside to how other people look like they're doing. So we don't see all their doubts, all their false starts, all their mistakes. And I thought that was a brilliant reason why you putting your video up, showing just how tricky it was for you at the start of your video journey, so that people can see, oh, it's not just me. And that's the thing about imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is the secret feeling of being a fraud, like not good enough, and the fear of being found out. And it affects 70% of high achievers at some point in their lives. So it's a very common thing. One of the problems with imposter syndrome is that people don't talk about it, because they think it's just them. They think that it must be some kind of character flaw or weakness or defect. There must be something wrong with me, and they're doing that comparing, and everyone else looks like they're doing great. And that's really at the heart of it.
Absolutely. So I remember there was a time when, and when you say it's at all levels of the scale, so as you progress, you kind of never really lose it, because you're growing, and then you're getting around a bigger audience and a bigger audience and a wider audience. And then, it kind of never goes really. It could always be there
Yes.
if you allow it to be. So what are kind of some of the insights into what you found? Is there a commonality between who this affects and who it doesn't? Why? Is there kind of, is it deeper? Is it something, in your past? What have you found any insights?
Yeah, so
that way?
the real core of imposter syndrome is all about our worth. It's the belief that our worth is conditional. That is, my worth depends on what I do. And that is a belief that goes across all societies, all cultures, but it's fundamentally wrong. And that's what's tripping us up. And imposter syndrome is the way that that belief shows up in high achievers. So as you say, you try bigger and bigger scale, and you keep bumping up against this. And so this is what everyone sees in terms of imposter syndrome, is a pattern. Sometimes it'll be high and sometimes it'll be low.
Right.
Cause of imposter syndrome is three things. One of it is a situation of high challenge and low support. So as you say, that high challenge is the thing that can trigger imposter syndrome. Combine it with low support and it's more likely to do so.
Right.
So the circumstances, the belief, as I said, that conditional worth belief that pretty much everyone has. And sometimes there's an imposter activity, I call it, something specific that people have attached their worth to more so than ever. So imagine somebody having a promotion at work, and they rise higher and higher, and they've come up through the technical field, and they get to a point where now they have to deal with finances. Now the finances might be a trigger, right? Or, the opposite direction, come up the finances and the technical side might be a trigger. So imposter syndrome, when it shows up, is that combination of all those three things.
So you mentioned challenge and support there, and I talk about this a lot. I talk about, you grow to the degree of which you embrace challenge and support. It's like it's equal, right? So what I've found is it's not kind of, you mentioned when the support's lower than the challenges, but that's also a perception, isn't it? Because you perceive there to be more challenges and less support, but in actual fact, the support's there somewhere, you're just kind of blind to it. And I guess it's a case of seeing where that support actually is.
Yes.
And neutralizing the two.
Exactly. So that would be the best strategy, because I wouldn't recommend not taking on challenges, because that's the fun, that's the adventure of life, that's the stretch, and the, oh my gosh, I did that, right? That's the joy in life. But managing the support that you get, one of the things about people with experiencing imposter syndrome is they tend not to talk about it. They tend not to ask for help. which is where the imposter syndrome kicks in, and they tend to take on too much.
Right.
So for that reason, people don't notice their support, or they don't seek their support, or they, coming back to it, they feel embarrassed. They think it's something about them. They think it's a weakness or flaw. So they're reluctant to ask for help, or sometimes it's a skills training that is that's needed. But if you can't admit you've got a problem, you're not going to embrace the solution.
Yeah, I talk a bit about worry in the program, and I talk about a worry is normally something that's kind of injected onto you. It's not something that it's not real. It's something that people are causing a worry about. And normally, a lot of the time, a worry is down to your own personal skill. So one of the things that I think that you can do to alleviate a worry of going out and speaking is just skill up a little bit, like go and do some research, back up your thoughts with some scientific research by someone else. Is that a good thing to do?
That's a great thing to do. So yeah, so accept that there's something that you can do about it. Even that's empowering. Right? Do the research, as you said. Get the help that's appropriate. So there's an organization called Toastmasters, which teaches public speaking, and it gives feedback and it gives practice in a space that's completely neutral. There's no family, there's no friends, there's no work colleagues, there's no customers, and so it's a really really open space for you to practice. So do something like that, and
Amazing.
all of those will help the skill. And if one thing doesn't work, try something else. Yeah, it's not about you. You just got to figure out what works for you.
Absolutely. So going into some tips then, for the listeners, people are thinking about going onto social media and speaking and doing their first podcast, doing their first blog, doing their first video. What are some really practical and actionable steps that they can take to kind of immediately feel like they've made progress? That you could give?
Great question. All right, I love this one. So what happens when we get afraid, right? And I'm calling it is a fear of public speaking, fear of putting a video out. When we detect a threat, when our brain detects a threat, then it puts our body into a fight, flight, or freeze state. It's saying there is a physical danger here. You're about to die. We need to do something. So it changes how the body is configured. It changes blood flow. It takes it away from the thinking part of the brain, the rational part of the brain, sends it to the muscles so that we can fight or run away. Or it turns it into, or it goes into a very low energy state to preserve the energy we have. So that would be collapse, that would be overwhelm, and that's where procrastination shows up. So the very first thing to do is to manage your nervous system state. Great. So there's several tools for this. So the first one is if you find yourself in the fight or flight, which is high blood pressure, racing heart, you get hot, you get flustered, you get all tingly. That's the fight or flight state. You've got stress hormones in the body. Cortisol and adrenaline are soaring through your blood. And the first thing you got to do is get rid of them. So a great thing to do is just shake your hands, stand up, shake your legs as if you're flicking mud off your hands and legs. Shake your back like a dog. And all of those is a physiological way to get that cortisol out of your system, get it processed by the liver, and that will help calm you down. Because one of the problems is that when you're in that state, your blood flow goes away from your prefrontal cortex, because you don't need to be thinking at that time, and your IQ drops by 13 points.
Wow.
And I don't know many people who have 13 points of IQ to spare.
I don't have 13 points.
and so so if you want to perform well, to be thinking clearly, to be speaking clearly and feel comfortable with it, the first thing to do is get out of that fight, flight, or freeze state. Once you've done that shaking for a couple of minutes, then the next thing is some deep breathing. A slow, deep breathing. There's different breathing techniques. Deep breath in and a long, slow exhale. That all is calming your nervous system. You might want to stroke your shoulders, stroke your arms, like you're stroking a dog or a cat. Yeah, all of this is really primal stuff, because those fears are unconscious. Yeah? So there are some we're aware of, but there's a number that we're not aware of as well. So that would be the very first step. And if you do that, then your video making is going to be much easier.
Very cool. That's some great advice there. And I really kind of resonate with what you're saying. I mean, this is basic human evolutional kind of, science and advice, backed up kind of advice here. And I see this in the markets. I've studied psychology for many years, and just those of you listening who are in the markets right now, there's a lot of cortisol being flowed around people's bodies right now as the markets plummet. But when you look at the markets over time, you'll see that people are very, very fight, flight, or freeze. You'll see the crashes are very, very quick, and then it takes a long time for the markets to recover, and then the crash is quick, and it takes a long time for the market to recover. And that is because we are more fearful than we are greedy. So we are more likely to run from something than we are likely to go to an apple tree and pick the food and fruit so we can eat. And if there was a lion or an apple tree, we'd run from the lion and then go and get the apples later on in life when we know it's safe. And that plays out over and over again. So that is some really, really great advice to immediately kind of diminish that as we're getting confidence in front of the camera.
That's
Are there any other tips that you can give for people who want to go and speak on camera and put a message out there for the first time ever? Is there any one thing that you would tell them to do?
I think that reframing that you were talking about, that shift in your perspective. I mean, certainly, you had your raw video. So my thoughts about producing video was that I had to look like Angelina Jolie and sound like Derek Jacobi.
Yeah, right.
But you have to be perfect, and there's this idea that you have to be perfect, and there's a lot of people out there, particularly on YouTube, Instagram, who are trying to show up like they're perfect. And it's unreasonable. So there was a study done in terms of how well people respond to perfection, and there's a certain point at which it puts people off. If something's too polished, it disconnects them. You can't relate to them, and people actually prefer getting that raw footage, just like your brilliant video, because they feel more connected.
Do you know what? That is really, really great advice there, because one of the things that I've always said is, well, we said it at the beginning of this, anything you do is an extension of you. If you want people to do business with you, they're going to want to do business with someone that they resonate with. They're going to want to see a human side. They're not going, if you want people to really connect with you and build like raving community of fans, they need to resonate with you. It's as simple as that. And if you're a robot or always perfect, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get as many, you might get a kind of one-sided polarized audience that is unsustainable, but you won't get the lifelong fans. And just to put that into perspective, I see a lot of people giving people what they feel that they need, right? So the way that they portray themselves is, you need to do this, you need this, right? And it all has to look kind of perfect. And then when you ask a business person why you're not selling, they'll say, oh, I think the best kind of sales is word of mouth. Well, why do you think that is? It's because they're talking to something that they want, removing you, which is what they need. And if that's the best way of selling, that means that you should stop telling them what they need and literally just give them what they want and be human and resonate with them, right?
Yeah.
So I think that sums that up perfectly. I think it's been an absolute brain exploder. I know this is going to help a lot of people listening to this podcast. And some of the great points that I took away was just really comparing yourself to others. You mentioned that it is actually healthy. I've mentioned this before. We compare ourselves to others when we're inspired by something, right? When we want to do better. It makes sense for someone with a heroin addiction to compare themselves with someone who's clean. It makes sense, right? It's wise to do that. Yeah. But also expect that there's support and challenge at every single level, and you just embrace the challenge and then try and see the support there, and do the exercises that Tara just mentioned. And please take your shot at this, right? Yeah. Get in front of a camera, get your voice out there, get your blog written. And just lastly, one great tip that I find is, if you really are struggling, the best way you can do this and make a start is to write everything down. So your first step would just be to write it out, okay? Because that way no one can see you. You're writing all your thoughts and opinions and insights and methodologies on paper. Then you can back that up with scientific research, if you like, in the background. And then once you've got that document, you will have the confidence to then read parts of that document and talk about parts of that document to the world. And it's black and white, right? Yeah. And you've perfected it. You've got it all right. There's no ums and ers. So if you're really struggling, do that. It really will help. And I know people that have done that, and it's then gone on to books and, articles and products and all the rest of it. So
Yeah.
Tara, thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. This has been a really valuable episode. Tell people who are listening how they can find you.
You can find me on LinkedIn, Tara Halliday -PhD. And you can find me at my website, which is completesuccess.co.uk.
Excellent. And Tara's also working with us inside the Tears of Freedom program if you are in there. So guys, I want to wish you a happy, healthy, safe day and rest of your weekend. And I'll see you next week.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.